My blood turned to ice the moment I saw the small amber vial in Cassandra's manicured fingers. She held it low, just below the marble countertop of our kitchen island, her other hand gripping a champagne flute filled with Dom Perignon. 2 drops of clear liquid fell from the vial's tip into the golden bubbles, disappearing without a trace. My stomach dropped like a stone thrown into a well. She capped the vial with practiced efficiency, slipped it into her Hermes clutch, and set the poison glass apart from the others on the silver tray. Then she turned toward the party guests flowing through our penthouse, her face transforming into that perfect smile she'd perfected over 3 years of marriage to my father, the smile that fooled everyone except me. My hands started trembling as I pressed myself against the hallway wall, heart hammering so loud I was certain she'd hear it. But Cassandra was already gliding toward the living room in her designer gown, playing the role of devoted stepmother celebrating her stepson's graduation from Columbia Law School. She had no idea what she'd just unleashed. Hey friend, quick favor before we start, hit subscribe button if you want more stories like this. 1 second for you, big deal for me. My name is Gabriel Westbrook, and for 23 years, I believed my mother was the only woman who could ever truly love me. When she died of cancer during my sophomore year at Columbia, I thought that chapter of my life had closed forever. Then my father, Harrison Westbrook, met Cassandra Laurent at a charity auction in Manhattan. She was everything my mother wasn't. Sophisticated where mom had been warm, polished where mom had been genuine, calculated where mom had been spontaneous. But she made my father smile again for the first time in 2 years, and that was enough for me to give her a chance. I know this is difficult, Cassandra had said during our first dinner together at Le Bernardin, her green eyes soft with what seemed like genuine sympathy. I'm not trying to replace your mother, Gabriel. I just want to be part of your family if you'll let me. The vulnerability in her voice caught me off guard. Here was this stunning woman, barely 12 years older than me, reaching out across the divide that separated us. My father watched our interaction with barely contained hope, his hand finding Cassandra's across the white tablecloth. I'd like that, I replied and meant it. The wedding 6 months later was a tasteful affair at the St. Regis, with 200 guests and enough flowers to stock a botanical garden. I walked Cassandra down the aisle since her own father had passed years earlier, a gesture that moved her to tears and sealed my father's devotion to both of us. For the first year of their marriage, Cassandra played her role flawlessly. She remembered my favorite foods and always kept the refrigerator stocked with them. She asked about my classes, my internships, my girlfriend Rebecca. She even helped me study for the LSAT, her MBA from Wharton proving useful as she explained complex logical reasoning problems. You're so much smarter than I was at your age, she'd say, bringing me coffee while I hunched over practice tests. Your father must be incredibly proud. The 3 of us fell into comfortable routines. Sunday dinners at Daniel, summer weekends in the Hamptons, quiet evenings in the penthouse where Cassandra would curl up with a book while Dad worked on his laptop and I studied. From the outside we looked like the perfect blended family. The first crack in the facade appeared during my second year of law school, but it was so subtle I almost missed it. I was home for Thanksgiving break, helping Cassandra prepare dinner while Dad took business calls in his study. She was describing her day at the Mets board meeting when the conversation shifted. Your father's been working too hard lately, she said, her knife moving precisely through a mountain of herbs. All those late nights reviewing acquisition deals. I worry about his health. He's always been a workaholic, I replied, focused on chopping vegetables. Even before Mom got sick. Yes, well. Her tone sharpened almost imperceptibly. Some habits die hard. Especially when there's so much at stake financially. I looked up from my cutting board. What do you mean? Oh, nothing specific. She waved her knife dismissively. Just that Westbrook Holdings has grown so much since we married. Sometimes I wonder if your father fully appreciates the complexity of managing such wealth. The comment stuck with me though I couldn't articulate why. Harrison Westbrook had built his private equity firm from nothing, turning it into a billion-dollar empire through sheer intelligence and relentless work. The idea that he didn't understand complex finances was absurd. But Cassandra's observation planted a seed of unease that would grow over the following months. The second crack appeared during spring break of my final year. I'd come home early from a trip to Miami, walking into the penthouse to find Cassandra at Dad's desk, surrounded by legal documents and financial statements. Oh. She looked up, startled. Gabriel, I didn't expect you until tomorrow. Flight got changed, I said, setting down my bag. What's all this? Just some paperwork your father asked me to organize. Her smile was bright and quick. You know how he hates dealing with administrative details. I moved closer, recognizing some of the documents. Estate planning materials, trust fund agreements, life insurance policies. Serious legal papers that Dad had always handled personally. Since when does he let anyone else touch his financial records? Since he married someone with an MBA and 20 years of corporate experience. Her laugh was light, but her hands moved protectively over the papers. I'm trying to help streamline his estate planning. Make sure everything's properly structured for tax efficiency. It sounded reasonable, but something felt wrong. My father was obsessively private about his finances, trusting only his longtime attorney and accountant with sensitive documents. The idea that he'd suddenly delegate such crucial matters to Cassandra, even his wife, seemed out of character. Does this have anything to do with my trust fund? I asked. My maternal grandmother had established a substantial trust in my name, managed separately from Dad's assets. When I turned 25 or graduated law school, whichever came last, I'd inherit $8 million, completely independent of the Westbrook family fortune. Your trust. Cassandra's expression was carefully neutral. Why would you think that? I don't know. You just seem very focused on estate planning lately. I'm focused on our family's financial security. She began stacking the papers, her movements suddenly brisk. Your father won't be around forever, Gabriel. Someone needs to think about these things. The way she said it made my skin crawl, though I couldn't explain why. There was something cold in her tone, calculating, as if she were already planning for a future without my father in it. That night, I called Rebecca from my childhood bedroom. I think something's wrong with Cassandra, I said, keeping my voice low. Wrong how? She's different when Dad's not around. More interested in his money than in him. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. She'd never warmed to Cassandra, claiming there was something performative about her affection for our family. Have you talked to your dad about it? And say what? That his wife seems too interested in his net worth? He'd think I was being paranoid. Maybe you are being paranoid, Rebecca said gently. She's been good to you, right? Supportive of your education, welcoming to your friends? She was right, of course. Cassandra had been nothing but loving and supportive for 3 years. She'd helped me through the stress of law school applications, celebrated my internship at Cravath, Swain and more, and never made me feel like an outsider in my own home. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it continued growing as graduation approached. The third and most significant crack appeared 2 weeks before my graduation ceremony. I was in Dad's study, using his printer to make copies of my job offer letters, when I accidentally picked up the wrong document from the output tray. It was a medical report dated 3 days earlier. Dad's name was at the top, along with the letterhead of Mount Sinai's cardiology department. Patient presents with persistent chest pains and irregular heartbeat. Stress test reveals significant cardiovascular strain. Recommend immediate lifestyle changes and monthly monitoring. Given family history and current symptoms, long-term prognosis warrants careful attention. My hands shook as I read the clinical language that basically said my father was having heart problems serious enough to affect his life expectancy. The report was addressed to both Dad and Cassandra, meaning she'd known for days about his declining health. I thought back to her comment about Dad not being around forever, and felt nauseated. That evening at dinner, I watched Cassandra serve Dad his favorite meal, beef Wellington with all the rich, fatty sides that were probably the worst possible choices for someone with heart problems. She smiled lovingly as he ate, refilled his wine glass, and never once mentioned what the cardiologist had said. "How was your day, darling?" she asked, her hand covering his on the white tablecloth. "Productive. Closed the P0ison deal finally." "Wonderful. You work so hard." Her thumb stroked across his knuckles. "You deserve to enjoy the fruits of your labor." The interaction looked sweet, caring, devoted. But now I could see the calculation underneath. She knew Dad was sick, knew his lifestyle was killing him, and she was actively encouraging the very behaviors that would hasten his decline. For the first time, I wondered if Cassandra Lauren Westbrook had married my father for love, or for the $100 million fortune she'd inherit when he died. 2 weeks later, at my graduation party, I would learn the answer to that question in the most terrifying way possible. The graduation party was Cassandra's idea, though she presented it as a joint decision during Sunday dinner the week before Columbia's ceremony. "We should celebrate Gabriel properly," she said, cutting into her salmon with surgical precision. "This is such a momentous achievement. Columbia Law School, a job offer from Cravath. We need to mark the occasion." Dad looked up from his phone, where he'd been reading emails despite my repeated requests to keep work away from the dinner table. "Whatever you think is appropriate, darling." I was thinking something elegant. Maybe 50 people? Mix of family, friends, Gabriel's classmates, professional contacts who might be valuable for networking. I shifted in my chair. I don't need a big party, Cassandra. Just dinner with close friends would be fine. Nonsense. Her smile was radiant, but I caught something calculating in her green eyes. This is your moment to shine, sweetheart. Your father's son graduating from one of the most prestigious law schools in the country? We need to celebrate that properly. Dad nodded absently, already back to scrolling through his emails. His color looked slightly gray, and I noticed him unconsciously rubbing his chest, the same gesture I'd observed more frequently since discovering his medical report. Harrison, are you listening? Cassandra's voice sharpened just enough to recapture his attention. Of course. Yes, a party sounds perfect. He managed a tired smile. Whatever makes Gabriel happy. But as the week progressed, it became clear that the party was more about what made Cassandra happy than about celebrating my achievements. She hired an event planner, booked the penthouse rooftop for Saturday night, and sent invitations to people I'd never met. Investors, board members of her various charitable organizations, society figures whose names appeared regularly in the New York social pages. I don't understand why Mrs. Pemberton from the Met needs to be at my graduation party, I told Rebecca during one of our phone calls. I've spoken to her exactly twice. Maybe Cassandra wants to show you off to her social circle, Rebecca suggested. You're about to be a lawyer at one of the most prestigious firms in the city. That's impressive to people who care about status. That's what bothers me. It feels like I'm being displayed rather than celebrated. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Have you noticed anything else weird about her lately? I had, actually. In the days leading up to the party, Cassandra had been almost manic in her attention to detail, obsessing over flower arrangements, changing the menu 3 times, making lists of guests and their preferred drinks. She'd also been asking pointed questions about my post-graduation plans. When exactly do you start at Cravath? She'd asked while reviewing catering options. September 1st. I'm taking the summer off to study for the bar exam. And your trust fund? That becomes accessible after graduation, correct? The question caught me off guard. Why? Just curious about the timing. Your grandmother was very generous, establishing that kind of financial independence for you. $8 million is life-changing money, I agreed carefully. Indeed it is. Her smile was perfectly pleasant. You'll need to be very careful about managing it responsibly. Perhaps your father could recommend some investment advisors. The conversation felt odd, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly why. But combined with everything else I'd observed over recent months, her increased interest in Dad's finances, her knowledge of his health problems, her sudden enthusiasm for throwing me an elaborate party, it added to my growing sense that something fundamental had changed in our family dynamic. The night of the party, I dressed in the new Tom Ford tuxedo Cassandra had insisted on buying for me. When I emerged from my bedroom, she was waiting in the hallway, stunning in a black evening gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. You look perfect, she said, adjusting my bow tie with motherly affection. I'm so proud of you, Gabriel. We both are. Dad appeared from the master bedroom, looking distinguished but tired in his own tuxedo. Ready to celebrate our graduate? The rooftop had been transformed into something from a magazine spread. White flowers and candles created an elegant atmosphere, while a jazz quartet played softly near the bar. Caterers in crisp uniforms circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The view of Manhattan's skyline provided a breathtaking backdrop, and I had to admit Cassandra had created something beautiful. The first guests arrived at 7, and within an hour the rooftop was filled with exactly the mix Cassandra had promised. Columbia classmates, family friends, and a surprising number of people I didn't recognize but who seemed to know detailed information about my academic achievements and career prospects. Gabriel, congratulations, said Mrs. Rose, a board member from one of Cassandra's charities. Your stepmother tells us you graduated summa cum laude. Thank you, I replied, though I was certain I'd never mention my honors to Cassandra. The evening proceeded smoothly with the expected speeches, toasts, and networking conversations. Dad looked tired but proud as he mingled with guests, while Cassandra moved through the crowd like a professional hostess, making sure everyone felt welcomed and engaged. I was talking with my study group from Columbia when I saw Cassandra's son Kevin arrive. He was 21, a junior at NYU, and had always maintained a polite but distant relationship with both Dad and me. Cassandra had primary custody from her previous marriage, but Kevin usually spent summers with his biological father in California. Didn't expect to see you here, I said, shaking his hand. Mom insisted. Kevin's smile was tight. Said it was important for family to support each other. Something in his tone caught my attention, but before I could respond, Cassandra appeared at my elbow with a champagne flute in her hand. "Gabriel, darling, I think it's time for toasts," she said. "Your father wants to say a few words." The next few minutes unfolded like a perfectly choreographed performance. Dad called for attention, delivered a heartfelt speech about watching me overcome the loss of my mother and achieve academic success, and raised his glass in salute. Guests applauded and drank, and I felt genuinely moved by his words. "Thank you, Dad," I said when the applause died down. "And thank you, Cassandra, for making tonight special." She beamed at me with apparent maternal pride. "You deserve all the celebration in the world, sweetheart." That's when I noticed the champagne service near the kitchen entrance. A silver tray held perhaps a dozen flutes filled with what appeared to be Dom Perignon, the expensive champagne Cassandra preferred for special occasions. She moved toward the tray with purpose, selecting a specific glass that she held carefully as she approached me. "A special toast," she said, extending the flute. "Just between us." I was reaching for the glass when something made me glance toward the kitchen entrance. Through the partially open door, I could see the marble island where additional champagne bottles were being opened by the catering staff. That's when I saw it. Cassandra thought she was hidden behind the kitchen door, but from my angle I had a clear view as she lifted a small amber vial from her clutch. Her movements were quick and practiced as she added 2 drops of clear liquid to a champagne flute, capped the vial, and set the poison glass apart from the others. My blood turned to ice. My stomach dropped. My hands began trembling as the full implication hit me. She was trying to poison me. The champagne flute in her hand, the one she was offering for our special toast, contained whatever substance she'd just added from that unmarked vial. And given the timing, just weeks after my graduation when my trust fund became accessible, the motive was crystal clear. $8 million. That's what my life was worth to her. I forced my face to remain neutral as she approached with the poisoned glass, my mind racing through options. I could refuse to drink, but that would alert her to my knowledge and potentially put Kevin or my father at risk if she tried again. I could pretend to drink without actually consuming the liquid, but she was watching me too carefully. Or I could do something that would expose her true nature while protecting myself. "Actually," I said, scanning the rooftop until I spotted Kevin near the dessert table, "let me grab Kevin first. This should be a family toast." Before Cassandra could respond, I walked over to her son with the poisoned champagne still in her hand. "Kevin," I called out, "come toast with us." He looked up from the chocolate mousse he'd been sampling. "What's the occasion?" "Family," I said simply, taking the glass from Cassandra's suddenly rigid fingers. "My stepmother wanted to make a special toast." I handed the glass to Kevin without hesitation, my eyes meeting Cassandra's across the rooftop. Her face had gone pale, but she couldn't say anything without revealing what she'd done. "To family," I said, raising my own glass of harmless champagne. Kevin smiled and lifted the poisoned glass to his lips. "To family." He drank deeply, draining half the champagne in one swallow. Cassandra's face transformed into a mask of horror so complete that several nearby guests noticed and asked if she was feeling well. But she couldn't do anything except watch her own son consume the poison she'd meant for me. For the first time in 3 years, I saw Cassandra Lauren Westbrook's true face, and she finally realized that the stepson she'd underestimated was far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. The change in Kevin was subtle at first. About 20 minutes after drinking the champagne, he began touching his throat and clearing it repeatedly. I was watching him carefully while maintaining conversations with guests, every nerve in my body on high alert. "You okay?" I asked, moving closer to him near the dessert station. "Yeah, just, my throat feels weird. Scratchy." He rubbed his neck, frowning. "And I'm getting a headache." Across the rooftop, Cassandra was maintaining her hostess duties, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes kept flicking toward Kevin. She knew what was coming. "Maybe you should sit down," I suggested. "Get some water." "I'm fine," Kevin insisted, but his words came out slightly slurred. "Just tired from finals, probably." Within another 10 minutes he was clearly not fine. His face had flushed red and he was sweating despite the cool evening air. When he tried to walk toward the bar, he stumbled, catching himself on a cocktail table. "Kevin." Cassandra's voice cut across the party chatter, sharp with manufactured concern. She rushed to his side, playing the worried mother perfectly. "What's wrong?" "I don't know," he mumbled, his speech increasingly impaired. "Feel dizzy." I moved closer, pulling out my phone. "I'm calling 911. "No," Cassandra said quickly. "It's probably just dehydration." Or maybe he mixed alcohol with medication. But Kevin's condition was deteriorating rapidly. His pupils were dilated, his breathing shallow, and his hands were shaking uncontrollably. Several guests had noticed the commotion and were gathering around, their festive mood shifting to concern. "Kevin, can you hear me?" I asked, crouching beside him as he slumped into a chair. He nodded weakly, but his eyes were unfocused. Whatever substance Cassandra had used was fast-acting and powerful. My father appeared at my shoulder. "What happened?" "He suddenly became ill," I said, my eyes meeting Cassandra's over Kevin's head. "Right after drinking that special champagne." Her face went white at my emphasis on the word special, and I knew she understood that I was aware of what she'd done. "I'm calling an ambulance," I announced, dialing 911 despite Cassandra's protests. "This looks serious." The next 20 minutes were chaos. EMTs arrived and immediately began working on Kevin, checking his vital signs and asking questions about what he'd consumed. I watched Cassandra answer their inquiries with apparent maternal concern, but I could see the calculation behind her eyes. "Has he taken any medications today?" one EMT asked. "No," Cassandra replied quickly. "He's perfectly healthy normally." "Any allergies? History of seizures or cardiac issues?" "Nothing like that." But when they asked about alcohol consumption, I interrupted. "He had champagne. From a specific bottle that was opened specially for toasts." The lead EMT looked up sharply. "How much did he drink?" "About half a glass. But it was from a particular bottle, not the general service." Cassandra shot me a look of pure hatred, but she couldn't contradict me in front of witnesses. They loaded Kevin into the ambulance and Cassandra insisted on riding with him. Before the doors closed, she leaned close to me. "If you're thinking what I think you're thinking," she whispered, "remember that accusing family members of serious crimes is a very dangerous game." "So is poisoning people," I replied quietly. Her face hardened. "Prove it." The ambulance pulled away, leaving me on the rooftop with 40 confused guests and a father who was demanding explanations I wasn't ready to give. "Gabriel, what's going on?" Dad asked as I began ushering people toward the elevators. "Cassandra seemed upset with you." "Just worried about Kevin," I said. "We should probably end the party early." It took another hour to clear the rooftop and deal with the caterers. Dad retreated to his study to make calls about Kevin's condition, leaving me alone to process what had just happened. I poured myself a Real drink, vodka neat, and tried to organize my thoughts. Cassandra had attempted to murder me. That much was certain. She'd used some kind of fast-acting poison, probably something that would mimic a heart attack or stroke in a young, healthy man. With my graduation complete and my trust fund accessible, my death would have cleared the way for her to inherit everything from Dad while eliminating the one person who might have questioned her motives. But I'd outmaneuvered her by switching the target to Kevin. Now her own son was hospitalized with whatever substance she'd meant for me, creating evidence that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. The question was what to do next. My first call was to Rebecca. "How did the party go?" she asked. "Cassandra tried to poison me." Silence. "Then, what?" I told her everything. The vial, the champagne, Kevin's collapse, the hospital. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Gabriel, that's attempted murder." "I know. You have to call the police." "With what proof?" "I saw her put something in a glass, but the glass is gone now. Kevin drank it. And even if they test his blood, how do I prove she meant it for me instead of him?" "The timing," Rebecca said immediately. "Your graduation, the trust fund access, your father's heart problems. It's all motive." She was right, but I needed more than motive. I needed evidence. My second call was to my father's longtime attorney, Vincent Carrera. I'd known him since childhood, and he'd helped draft the trust documents when I turned 18. "Gabriel," he said, sounding surprised to hear from me so late. "How was the graduation party?" "Complicated." "Vincent, I need legal advice, and I need you to treat this conversation as privileged." "Of course." I told him a modified version of events, focusing on Kevin's sudden illness and my suspicions about Cassandra's motives regarding my inheritance. I didn't mention witnessing the poisoning directly, not yet. "These are serious accusations," Vincent said when I finished. "If you're suggesting what I think you're suggesting." "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking hypothetical questions about what someone would need to prove attempted murder by poisoning." Vincent was quiet for several minutes. "Hypothetically, you'd need physical evidence of the poison, proof of who administered it, and clear motive. Medical records from the victim would be crucial, particularly toxicology reports." And if the intended victim wasn't actually the person who consumed the poison? That would complicate prosecution but not necessarily prevent it. Intent matters as much as outcome in attempted murder cases. After I hung up, I sat in the empty penthouse considering my options. I could go to the police immediately, but without concrete evidence, it would be my word against Cassandra's. She was a master manipulator who'd spent 3 years building her reputation as a devoted wife and stepmother. I was a recent law school graduate making extraordinary accusations against my own family. Or I could be strategic about it, gather evidence, build an unshakable case, and ensure that when I finally acted, Cassandra's downfall would be complete and permanent. I chose strategy. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Kevin is stable. Doctors say it was probably food poisoning or a reaction to something. He'll be fine by tomorrow. See, food poisoning. Of course that would be her story. I texted back, glad he's okay. I was worried when he collapsed right after drinking that special champagne. Her response came immediately, coincidence. Could have been anything he ate. Maybe. Though it's interesting that no one else got sick from the catered food. A longer pause then, what are you implying, Gabriel? Nothing at all. Just glad Kevin is safe. See you tomorrow. I put my phone away and began planning the most important case of my legal career, one where the defendant was my own stepmother and the stakes were literally life and death. By morning, I would begin systematically dismantling the life Cassandra had built on lies, manipulation, and attempted murder. She challenged me to prove what she'd done. Challenge accepted. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my desk with legal pads and my laptop, constructing a timeline that would either save my life or destroy my family, possibly both. The evidence fell into 3 categories: motive, means, and opportunity. Law school had taught me that successful prosecutions required all 3, backed by documentation that could withstand cross-examination. Motive was the strongest element. I created a detailed financial analysis showing exactly what Cassandra stood to gain from my death. With Dad's heart condition and my impending trust fund access, eliminating me would position her to inherit everything. I documented her increasing interest in estate planning, her knowledge of Dad's medical problems, and the convenient timing of my accident, just weeks after graduation. Means would be harder to prove without the actual poison, but I had advantages Cassandra didn't know about. My toxicology coursework at Columbia had been more extensive than most law students took, partly because I'd considered specializing in environmental law. I understood how certain substances could mimic natural causes of death in young, healthy adults. Opportunity was documented by dozens of witnesses who'd seen Cassandra handling the champagne service, though none of them understood the significance of what they'd observed. At 6 a.m. I called the hospital. I'm calling about Kevin Loran, I told the nurse. He came in last night from a graduation party. Are you family? Stepbrother. How is he doing? He's stable and awake. Doctors want to keep him for observation today, but he should be able to go home tomorrow. Did they determine what caused his collapse? I can't discuss specific medical details, but they're running additional tests to rule out any underlying conditions. Perfect. Medical tests meant toxicology screens, which meant potential evidence. My next call was to Rebecca, who answered on the first ring despite the early hour. I need your help, I said without preamble. And I need you to document everything we discuss. What kind of help? The kind that could get us both in trouble if we're not careful. She was quiet for a moment. I'm listening. I outlined my plan. Rebecca was a journalism major at Columbia with internship experience at the New York Times. Her investigative skills and press connections could help me gather information about Cassandra's background that might not be accessible through legal channels. I need to know everything about Cassandra Loran, I said. Her previous marriages, her financial history, any patterns that might suggest she's done this before. Gabriel, this sounds like you're planning to investigate your own stepmother. That's exactly what I'm planning. Are you sure about this? If you're wrong? Then Kevin almost died from food poisoning at the same party where I happened to inherit $8 million. What are the odds? Rebecca was convinced. We agreed to meet that afternoon to begin building a comprehensive profile of the woman who tried to murder me. At 9 a.m. I drove to the hospital. Kevin was awake but groggy, connected to N4 and monitoring equipment that beeped steadily beside his bed. How are you feeling? I asked. Like I got hit by a truck, he muttered. Mom says it was food poisoning. What do you remember about last night? Not much after we toasted. Everything got fuzzy pretty quickly. He looked at me more sharply. What? Do you think something specific caused it? I chose my words carefully. I'm just trying to understand what happened. You seemed fine all evening until right after drinking that champagne. Yeah, that's weird, isn't it? Kevin frowned. I mean, I've had plenty of Dom Perignon before. Never made me sick like that. Did your mother say anything else about what the doctors think? Just that they're running more tests. Something about ruling out allergic reactions or drug interactions. He paused. But I haven't taken any medications lately, and I've never been allergic to anything. Cassandra appeared in the doorway before I could respond, carrying flowers and wearing the expression of a devoted mother. Gabriel, she said, her voice carefully modulated. How thoughtful of you to visit. Just wanted to make sure Kevin was okay. The doctors say he'll be fine. Just one of those mysterious things that sometimes happen. Her eyes met mine with unmistakable warning. Thank goodness it wasn't anything serious. I spent another 20 minutes making small talk before excusing myself. In the hospital corridor, I called Vincent Carrera again. I need you to do something that might seem unusual, I said. I'm listening. I want you to review my trust fund documents and make sure they're ironclad. Specifically, I want to ensure that if something happens to me, the money goes where my grandmother intended, not into any kind of family estate that could be contested. Gabriel, is there something specific you're concerned about? Let's call it preventive legal planning. Vincent was quiet for several minutes. I'll review everything today. But Gabriel, if you're worried about your safety, you should consider involving law enforcement. I'm handling it. That afternoon, Rebecca and I met at a coffee shop in Greenwich Village, far from anywhere we might encounter Cassandra or Dad. She'd already begun her research. Your stepmother is interesting, Rebecca said, opening her laptop. Born Cassandra Marie Laurent, currently 42 years old. Before marrying your father, she was married twice. I knew about Kevin's father. That was husband number 2. Husband number 1 was Dr. Richard Pemberton, a cardiologist in Boston. They were married for 3 years, from 2008 to 2011. I felt cold suddenly. What happened to him? Heart attack at age 45. Massive cardiac event, very sudden. Left Cassandra a widow with substantial life insurance proceeds and his medical practice's value. Healthy 45-year-old cardiologist dies of a heart attack? That's what I thought too. So I dug deeper. Rebecca turned her laptop toward me. Dr. Pemberton had been experiencing stress-related symptoms for months before his death. His colleagues said he'd been working too hard, eating poorly, not taking care of himself. Or someone was slowly poisoning him with something that would cause cardiac stress. That's a serious accusation. It's also a pattern. Husband 1 dies of heart problems. Husband 2, Kevin's father, divorced her after 2 years citing irreconcilable differences. And now husband 3 has cardiac issues that started shortly after they married. Rebecca's expression was grim. There's more. After Dr. Pemberton's death, there were some questions raised by his family about the circumstances. Nothing official, but his brother apparently hired a private investigator. What did they find? Nothing conclusive. But the investigator noted some inconsistencies in Cassandra's story about the night he died. She claimed to be at a charity event, but security footage from the venue only showed her arriving after the estimated time of death. I stared at the laptop screen, feeling pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. 3 husbands. 1 dead from heart problems, 1 divorced, 1 currently having cardiac issues. And she knew about Dad's condition before the party. There's something else, Rebecca said quietly. I found Cassandra's social media from around the time of Dr. Pemberton's death. Lots of grief posts, but also some interesting comments about life insurance and making sure Richard's sacrifice wasn't in vain. Sacrifice. That's what she called his death. Not loss or tragedy, sacrifice. I pulled out my phone and called Vincent again. I need you to review my father's life insurance policies and estate planning. Specifically, I want to know what happens if he dies while married to Cassandra. Gabriel, these questions are becoming very specific. What's going on? Just check the documents. I'll explain later. We spent the next 2 hours developing a comprehensive timeline of Cassandra's life, focusing on her financial status before and after each marriage. The pattern was clear. She targeted wealthy men, isolated them from family and friends, then benefited substantially from their deaths or divorces. She's systematic, Rebecca observed. Each marriage lasted between 2 and 5 years, long enough to establish rights but not long enough for the husbands to fully understand what they'd married. And now she's running out of time with Dad. His heart condition means she needs to act quickly before I become suspicious or he changes his estate planning. My phone buzzed with a text from Cassandra. Kevin is being discharged tomorrow morning. The doctors confirmed it was just food poisoning. Thank you for your concern. I showed the message to Rebecca. She's still pushing the food poisoning story. Which means she doesn't know that you saw her spike the champagne. Exactly. She thinks she's safe as long as Kevin's illness can be explained away. That evening, I returned to the penthouse to find Dad in his study, looking exhausted and worried. How's Kevin? I asked. Better. Cassandra says the doctors think it was something he ate. Dad rubbed his chest absently, the gesture that had become more frequent since his cardiac diagnosis. I'm just glad it wasn't more serious. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. How well did you know Cassandra before you married her? I mean, did you meet her friends, her family, people from her past? Dad looked up from his papers, frowning slightly. What kind of question is that? I'm just curious. You knew Mom's whole family, her college friends, her work colleagues. With Cassandra, it seems like her life started when she met you. She's a private person, Gabriel. Not everyone needs to broadcast their entire history. But don't you think it's strange that she never talks about her first husband? Kevin's never even mentioned his father. Dad's expression hardened. Your stepmother has been nothing but loving and supportive to both of us. Whatever happened in her previous relationships is none of our business. Even if those relationships ended under suspicious circumstances? The words were out before I could stop them. Dad stood up slowly, his face flushing with anger. What exactly are you implying? I realized I'd pushed too far, too fast. Nothing specific. I just think we don't know as much about her background as we should. Gabriel, I'm going to say this once. Cassandra is my wife and your stepmother. Whatever paranoid theories you're developing need to stop. She's been part of this family for 3 years and she's earned our trust and respect. Even though Kevin almost died drinking champagne she specifically prepared? That's enough. Dad's voice was cold. I don't want to hear another word of this conspiracy nonsense. Kevin got food poisoning at a party with 50 other people. It happens. I backed down, but the conversation confirmed my worst fears. Dad was so completely under Cassandra's influence that he couldn't see the danger even when it was pointed out directly. She'd isolated him not just from potential romantic rivals, but from anyone who might question her motives. Which meant I was truly on my own. That night, I made a decision that would either expose Cassandra or destroy my relationship with my father forever. I called Detective P0ison, the lead investigator who'd handled a fraud case for Dad's company 2 years earlier. Mr. Westbrook, he said, sounding surprised. How can I help you? I need to report a suspected attempted murder. Detective P0ison met me the next morning at a diner in Queens, far from Manhattan's social circles where Cassandra might have connections. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s with intelligent eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who'd heard every possible story during his 20-year career. Walk me through this from the beginning, he said, pulling out a digital recorder. And understand that if you're filing a false report, there will be consequences. I told him everything. The financial timeline, Cassandra's suspicious background, my father's cardiac condition, and finally the champagne incident at the graduation party. When I finished, Detective P0ison was quiet for several minutes. This is a serious accusation, he said finally. You're alleging that your stepmother attempted to murder you and accidentally poisoned her own son instead. That's correct. And your primary evidence is that you witnessed her adding an unknown substance to a champagne glass. Along with the financial motive, the timing, and the pattern of suspicious deaths in her previous relationships. Detective P0ison leaned back in the booth. Mr. Westbrook, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen cases where family members kill for money, and I've seen cases where paranoid relatives make false accusations. What I need from you is evidence that would stand up in court. What kind of evidence? Physical proof of the poison. Medical documentation of the victim's condition. Witnesses who can corroborate your version of events. Financial records showing motive. I opened the folder I'd brought. I have financial records showing exactly what Cassandra stands to inherit if both my father and I die. I have documentation of her previous husband's suspicious death. And I have Kevin in the hospital with symptoms consistent with poisoning. But no witnesses to the actual poisoning. No identification of the substance. And no proof that she intended to harm you rather than her son. He was right and we both knew it. Without more concrete evidence, the case would never make it to trial. What would you need to open an official investigation? I asked. Ideally the poison itself. Or medical evidence that definitively rules out natural causes for Kevin's illness. or financial records showing active planning to benefit from your death. And if I could provide those things? Detective Morrison studied my face carefully. Then we'd have something to work with. But Mr. Westbrook, let me give you some advice. If you really believe your stepmother tried to kill you, you need to be very careful about how you proceed. False accusations can be dangerous, but so can cornering someone who's already attempted murder once. After the detective left, I sat in the diner thinking about my next move. I needed evidence that Cassandra couldn't explain away or dismiss. I needed something that would force law enforcement to take the case seriously. I needed the poison itself. That afternoon, I returned to the penthouse while Dad was at work and Cassandra was visiting Kevin at the hospital. Using the security code I'd had since high school, I let myself in and began searching. Cassandra's bedroom was immaculate as always. Her walk-in closet contained hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of designer clothes, shoes, and handbags, all perfectly organized. I methodically searched every purse, every jacket pocket, every hidden compartment I could find. Nothing. Her bathroom yielded prescription bottles for standard medications. Multivitamins, sleeping pills, anxiety medication. I photographed the labels but found nothing unusual. I was about to give up when I remembered the Hermes clutch she'd carried to the party. It wasn't in her closet with the other bags, which meant she was probably still carrying it. I moved to Dad's study, thinking she might have left it there during one of their evening discussions about estate planning. Behind his desk, I found a small safe I'd never noticed before. The combination lock looked new. On a hunch, I tried Kevin's birthday, March 15, 01. The lock clicked open. Inside were documents I recognized, trust agreements, insurance policies, and estate planning materials. But there was also something else. A small amber vial, identical to the one I'd seen Cassandra use at the party. My hands trembled as I carefully removed it. The vial was nearly empty, with perhaps one dose remaining of a clear liquid that had no obvious odor. There was no label, no indication of what the substance might be. But it was physical evidence that Cassandra had access to an unknown substance she'd hidden in my father's safe. I photographed the vial in place, then carefully removed it, sealing it in a plastic bag I'd brought for exactly this purpose. I also photographed the other contents of the safe, particularly documents showing recent changes to Dad's estate planning that heavily favored Cassandra. As I was replacing everything else in the safe, I heard a key in the front door. My blood turned to ice. Cassandra was home early. I closed the safe, grabbed my evidence bag, and slipped out of the study just as I heard her heels clicking across the marble foyer. "Gabriel?" she called out. "Is that you?" "Just grabbing some things from my room," I replied, trying to keep my voice casual. She appeared in the hallway, still wearing her hospital visitor's badge. Her eyes were sharp, assessing. "How did you get in?" "I still have the security code. Dad never changed it after I moved back from school." She studied my face carefully. "Kevin sends his love. He's feeling much better today." "I'm glad to hear that." The doctors confirmed it was definitely food poisoning. Nothing more serious. She paused meaningfully. "Sometimes when people are under stress, they imagine things that aren't there." "I'm sure you're right." But as I left the penthouse, I could feel her eyes on me, and I knew that the game between us had entered a new phase. She suspected I knew something, and I now had physical evidence of her crime. The only question was which of us would make the next move first. I drove straight to Detective Morrison's precinct and requested an immediate meeting. "I have the poison," I said, placing the sealed bag on his desk. His eyebrows rose. "Where did you get this?" "My stepmother's hiding place." "And you obtained it how, exactly?" I realized I'd made a mistake. "I found it in my father's house during a legal search of my own residence." Detective Morrison looked skeptical but didn't press the issue. "We'll need to have this analyzed. It'll take a few days to get results." "And then?" "Then we'll see if your stepmother has some explaining to do." As I left the precinct, my phone buzzed with a text from Cassandra. "We need to talk. Tonight after dinner. It's important." I stared at the message, understanding that she'd discovered the missing vial. The careful dance we'd been performing was over. Now it was time for one of us to destroy the other. Dinner that night was a perfectly choreographed performance of family normalcy. Dad asked about my bar exam preparations, Cassandra inquired about Kevin's recovery, and I played the role of dutiful son and stepson while internally calculating how long it would take Detective Morrison to get toxicology results. "I spoke with Kevin's doctor today," Cassandra said as we finished our salmon. "They're releasing him tomorrow with a clean bill of health." "That's wonderful news," Dad replied. "Just goes to show how these food poisoning incidents can look scary but resolve quickly." Indeed. Cassandra's eyes found mine across the table. Though it does make one wonder about contamination at catered events. Perhaps we should be more careful about our vendors in the future. The subtle threat in her words was unmistakable. She knew I suspected something about Kevin's illness, and she was warning me to be careful about pushing the investigation further. I'm sure it was just an isolated incident, I said carefully. I hope so. It would be terrible if anyone else got sick from something they consumed at a family celebration. After dinner, Dad retreated to his study for business calls, leaving Cassandra and me alone in the living room. She poured herself a glass of wine and settled into her usual chair, the picture of elegant composure. You mentioned wanting to talk, I said. Yes. She sipped her wine, studying me over the rim of the glass. I think we need to clear the air about a few things. Such as your recent behavior. The suspicious questions about my background, the unusual interest in estate planning, the way you've been watching me at family gatherings. I kept my expression neutral. I don't know what you mean. Of course you do. Her smile was cold. You're a smart young man, Gabriel. Too smart for your own good, perhaps. Is that a threat? It's an observation. Intelligence can be dangerous when it's paired with paranoia and misguided suspicions. She set down her wine glass and leaned forward slightly. Let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a young man who thought he saw something that wasn't there. He became obsessed with his delusions, alienated his family, and eventually destroyed everything he claimed to be protecting. Interesting story. How does it end? Tragically, I'm afraid. The young man's obsession consumed him completely. He lost his inheritance, his family's trust, and ultimately his own credibility. No one believed him when he claimed to be a victim, because everyone could see he was the real danger. The threat was no longer subtle. Cassandra was telling me exactly what would happen if I continued pursuing evidence of her crimes. She would systematically destroy my reputation, my relationship with my father, and my access to the trust fund that represented my financial independence. That would be unfortunate, I said. Of course, some stories have different endings. Oh. Sometimes the young man turns out to be right about his suspicions. Sometimes the real villain underestimates how much evidence he's gathered. And sometimes justice actually wins. Cassandra's composure flickered for just a moment. Evidence of what, exactly? You tell me. You're the one who seems worried about what I might have discovered. We stared at each other across the coffee table, two predators taking each other's measure. Finally she spoke. You think you're very clever, don't you? I think I'm alive, which is more than you intended. The admission hung in the air between us like a blade. Cassandra's mask finally fell away completely, revealing the cold calculation underneath. Prove it, she said quietly. I plan to. With what evidence? Kevin had food poisoning from a catered event with 50 witnesses. Your father has a stress-related cardiac condition that's been developing for months. And you're a paranoid young man who's been making increasingly erratic accusations against the woman who's done nothing but love and support your family. Is that the story you're planning to tell? It's the truth everyone will believe when you inevitably have some kind of breakdown. Really, Gabriel, accusing your stepmother of attempted murder? Who would believe such a ridiculous claim? But her confidence was just slightly forced, and I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. She didn't know exactly what evidence I might have, which meant she was operating blind. You made a mistake, I said. Did I? You kept the poison. Her face went completely still. In Dad's safe. The same vial you used at the graduation party. I'm sure the police will find it very interesting when they analyze the contents. For the first time since I'd known her, Cassandra looked genuinely afraid. You can't have. Chemical analysis takes about 72 hours. The police should have results by Thursday. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the windows that overlooked Central Park. When she turned back, her expression had hardened into something arctic. You have no idea what you've done, she said. I've saved my own life. And probably my father's. Your father loves me. He won't believe your accusations, especially when they come from a son who's clearly having some kind of psychological episode. We'll see. Cassandra moved closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Listen to me very carefully, Gabriel. If you pursue this fantasy of yours, I will destroy everything you care about. Your relationship with your father. Your legal career. Your precious trust fund. I will make sure that you lose everything, and that everyone you know understands exactly what kind of person you really are. And what kind of person is that? The kind who makes false accusations against family members for financial gain. The kind who would poison his own stepbrother and then try to blame his stepmother. The kind who would exploit his father's grief and medical condition to manipulate him. The reversal was breathtaking in its audacity. She was planning to frame me for Kevin's poisoning while positioning herself as the victim of my alleged scheme to eliminate competition for Dad's inheritance. That's quite a story, I said. Think anyone will believe it? Everyone will believe it. Because unlike your wild conspiracy theory, my version is supported by facts. Kevin drank from a glass that you handed to him. You're the one who benefits from eliminating family members. You're the one with motive, means, and opportunity. But she'd made another mistake. In her eagerness to threaten me, she'd confirmed that she understood the significance of the champagne glass switch, knowledge she shouldn't have unless she'd known the drink was poisoned. Interesting theory, I said. Except for one small problem. Which is? You just admitted you knew the champagne was poisoned. Her face went white as she realized what she'd said. I did no such thing. You said I had motive to eliminate family members by poisoning Kevin. But if Kevin's illness was just food poisoning from a catered event, how could I have been responsible? The only way your accusation makes sense is if you know the champagne was deliberately contaminated. Cassandra opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. For the first time in our conversation she was speechless. It's over, Cassandra, I said quietly. The police have the poison, they'll have medical evidence from Kevin's blood work, and now they'll have a recording of this conversation where you inadvertently admitted knowing the champagne was contaminated. Recording? Her voice was barely a whisper. I pulled out my phone, showing her the voice memo app that had been running throughout our discussion. Every word. Including your threats and your accidental confession. She stared at the phone, her face cycling through rage, fear, and finally a kind of desperate calculation. You don't understand, she said suddenly. Your father is going to die anyway. His heart condition is worse than he's told you. I was trying to spare him the pain of watching you destroy yourself with these paranoid delusions. By murdering me? By giving you a peaceful exit before you could do any more damage to this family. Even in the face of complete exposure, she was still trying to manipulate the narrative, to position murder as mercy. That's not your choice to make, I said. Isn't it? She moved closer again. Gabriel, listen to me. We can still fix this. The police don't have to know about any of this. We can say you found an old prescription medication in the safe, something that got mixed up by mistake. Kevin had an allergic reaction, nothing more. We can all move forward as a family. Like you moved forward with your first husband? Her expression hardened. Richard's death was natural causes. A heart attack brought on by stress. Stress from being slowly poisoned by his wife? You can't prove that. Maybe not. But I can prove what you tried to do to me. Dad's voice from the hallway interrupted us. What's going on out here? I could hear voices from the study. Cassandra and I turned to see him standing in the doorway, looking concerned and slightly confused. His hair was disheveled and he was still wearing his reading glasses. Just having a family discussion, Cassandra said, her voice immediately shifting back to its usual warmth. Gabriel was telling me about his bar exam preparations. But Dad's eyes were sharper than usual, and I realized he'd probably heard more of our conversation than Cassandra realized. Gabriel, he said quietly, is there something you need to tell me? I looked at Cassandra, then back at my father. This was the moment of truth, the point where I either destroyed my relationship with him or saved both our lives. Yes, Dad. There is. The toxicology report came back 3 days later. Aconitine, a powerful alkaloid derived from monkshood plants. In the doses Cassandra had been using, it would cause rapid cardiac arrest that could easily be mistaken for a heart attack in someone with pre-existing coronary problems. Detective Morrison's investigation expanded quickly once they had physical evidence. Kevin's blood work confirmed traces of the same substance, and a search warrant for the penthouse revealed additional vials hidden in Cassandra's personal effects. The deeper they dug, the more damning the evidence became. Financial records showed Cassandra had been systematically researching the legal requirements for inheriting spousal assets in New York. Internet searches on her laptop revealed extensive research into undetectable poisons and their effects on cardiac patients. Most damaging was the discovery of a draft email on her computer, apparently intended for her attorney, discussing contingency planning for Harrison's inevitable cardiac event, and the importance of ensuring Gabriel's unstable behavior doesn't interfere with estate distribution. When the police arrested her, Cassandra maintained her innocence to the end, claiming the poison had been planted and the evidence fabricated. But her story fell apart under scrutiny, particularly when investigators contacted Dr. Pemberton's family and learned about the suspicious circumstances surrounding her first husband's death. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Cassandra's defense team argued that I had orchestrated the entire scheme to eliminate my stepmother and gain access to my father's wealth. They painted me as a calculating sociopath who had poisoned Kevin and then manipulated evidence to frame an innocent woman. But the physical evidence was overwhelming. Surveillance footage from the graduation party showed Cassandra handling the champagne service. Kevin's medical records documented symptoms consistent with aconitine poisoning. And the recording of our final conversation revealed her knowledge of details she couldn't have known unless she was responsible for the contamination. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and fraud. The judge sentenced her to 25 years to life, with no possibility of parole. Dad never fully recovered from the betrayal, but he did eventually accept the truth about the woman he'd married. The cardiac episodes that had worried us both disappeared completely once Cassandra was removed from his life. Apparently his heart condition had been the result of months of small-dose poisoning designed to weaken him gradually. "I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner," he told me the night after the verdict was announced. "I wanted so badly to believe in her, in the family we'd built together. She was an expert manipulator, Dad. She fooled everyone." "Not everyone. You saw through her." Kevin recovered completely and has since become one of my closest friends. Learning that his mother had tried to murder me using him as an unwitting weapon was devastating, but it also freed him from years of manipulation and emotional abuse he hadn't even recognized. He testified at the trial, describing the subtle ways Cassandra had controlled and isolated him throughout his childhood. His testimony helped establish a pattern of manipulation that supported the prosecution's case. As for me, I passed the bar exam and started my position at Cravath as planned. My trust fund remained intact, though I've donated substantial portions to organizations that support domestic violence victims and raise awareness about financial abuse within families. I still live in the penthouse with Dad, who's healthier and happier than he's been in years. We've rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of complete honesty. No more secrets, no more blind trust in people who might not deserve it. Rebecca and I married last spring in a small ceremony with just immediate family and close friends. Dad walked her down the aisle since her own father couldn't travel, and the whole event was a celebration of genuine love and chosen family rather than the elaborate performance that had characterized Cassandra's approach to everything. Sometimes people ask if I regret exposing Cassandra, if I wish I'd found a way to handle the situation that didn't result in her imprisonment. The answer is simple: she tried to murder me for money, and she would have tried again if I hadn't stopped her. Some people are beyond redemption. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. And sometimes, the only way to protect the people you love is to destroy the person who threatens them. Cassandra Laurent is exactly where she belongs, behind bars, where she can't hurt anyone else. And I'm exactly where I belong, surrounded by people who love me for who I am, not for what I can give them. The glass she meant for me saved my life in the end, because it revealed her true nature when it mattered most. Justice isn't always poetic, but sometimes it's perfectly served. Have you ever experienced manipulation from someone you trusted? How do you recognize when someone's love might be conditional on what they can gain from you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next chilling tale of justice served cold. See you in the next story.